If there's one thing that Isayama does more than pretty much anyone else, it's parallels and foreshadowing. Anime onlys may only just be starting to realise just how deep this goes, but trust me, it goes deep. One key example of this is the character development, of Armin and Bertolt, since Armin and Bertolt develop parallel and opposite one another. This video will primarily be covering their development in Season 3 Episode 15, or overall Episode 52. But in order to understand their development in that episode, we also have to do a brief overview of all their development up to that point. Now, what I want to stress is that this isn't a character analysis for either of them. That's not what this video is. I'm not going to be going super in-depth into their character development either throughout the show or in episode 52. We're looking at a brief overview of their character development in broad strokes, if you will, and then comparing them and showing how they contrast each other. If you want a more in-depth analysis of their characters, I'll do that in a later video. First, we'll go through a brief overview of their character arcs in the anime thus far. This will be very brief, and as I said, I'll make more detailed videos in the future. Also, this video will be based only on what anime onlys are currently aware of, so no manga influence will be present in this video. Armin starts off weak, afraid, and he feels as though he's alone in the world. Even though he has Eren and Mikasa, he feels as though he's always trailing behind them and ultimately on his own. He doesn't know his skill and potential, but as the show progresses, he's put in situations where he's forced to come out of his shell more and more, slowly realising his potential through these situations that are completely out of his control. As time progresses, he gains more people who trust in him, and who he can trust in return, and begins to realise that he plays an important role. And more importantly, that he doesn't have to fight on his own. It's not him against the world, as he initially thought. He's part of a team of people who love and care about him, and who would die for him, and vice versa. This section of his character development really culminates in Season 2 Episode 11, where, for the first time, he's the one who comes up with the idea that saves the day. So, sure, in past and future events in the anime, he figures things out that helps us overcome the enemy side, such as identifying the female titan or figuring out Reiner's hiding spot inside the wall, but this is the first and only time, I believe, so far in the show, that he, and he alone, in the heat of the moment, when everything looks like it's over, comes up with an idea and executes it to save the day. And he did it by throwing away his humanity and throwing away his friendship with the warriors, particularly Bertolt. Bertolt's arc is basically a mirror image of Armin. When we first see him, he's the colossal titan, the largest, most imposing, powerful, terrifying thing humanity has ever faced. And he works with a close-knit group of allies to get the job done, allies who he trusts in. Now, of course, there is a lot more going on behind the scenes with Bertolt's character, especially in these moments and the moments that come before it, but remember, this video is only covering what anime onlys know, and I'm not going to let my knowledge from the manga influence my analysis for now. I can do that when I eventually go into a more in-depth discussion of his character. Bertholdt is fully aware of how capable he is and how much potential he has, even stating that he joined the military because he realises he's very athletic and he hopes to use his talent to get into the military police. As the show progresses, he's put into situations where he has to go further and further into his shell. He can't reveal his true emotions or intentions, and he's forced to hide his true self deeper and deeper inside, and further losing that potential as he hides himself away more and more. Now, there is a lot of really interesting stuff about Bertolt's character that I'd absolutely love to go into, but just like with Armin, as I said, this is just an overview. But the warriors especially, I will go into much more detail into in future, when they get their own separate videos. As time progresses, he loses more and more of the people he can put his trust into. He presumably loses contact with his family when he goes on his mission, then Marcel is eaten, and he leaves them for the military police and then crystallizes shortly after. Ryder loses his goddamn mind, And finally, his friends in the 104th Cadets view him as nothing but a traitor when Reiner reveals their secret without his prior consent. He gradually begins to lose the people he cares about. The only one who kind of stays is Reiner, but with the state Reiner's mind is in, he's more of a liability than a friend at times. He's left completely alone, having to essentially take care and constantly worry about Reiner's mental state all by himself. And this section of his character development really comes to culmination in Season 2, Episode 11 again, where, for the first time we're aware of, it's his actions, him losing his cool, that directly results in him, Reiner, and Ymir losing Eren and failing their mission. And on top of that, he broke down completely. In this scene, he shows his humanity more than ever before, trying desperately not to throw his friendship with the 104th Cadets away. And of course, they both like Annie, though Bertholdt seems to like her more than Armin does, at least for the time being. Now that being said, there are also parallels between Bertolt and Mikasa, but we won't go into those today, that's for another video. This parallel between the two is more obvious than ever in Season 3, Episode 15, at least in my perspective. In Season 3, Part 1, we see Armin struggling with the consequences of rising above monsters by giving up your humanity. In theory, it's a good idea, but Armin is really struggling to come to terms with the reality of it. He's struggling with how easy he found it to kill a human, and he begins doubting himself, beginning to relapse on his development. He reached his goal of saving the day by giving up his humanity, but now that he's done that, he's scared by the person he's become, and he thinks he's become a bad person, who's no longer as human as everyone else. He views himself as a monster, and wants to regain that lost humanity. At the same time, Bert is having the opposite problem. He's holding on to his humanity too much. He can't get over his friendship with the 104th, his empathy for the people of the walls, and his love for Annie, who they abandoned thinking she was being tortured endlessly. He's too human for the job he's doing, and it's causing him to struggle. He's supposed to give up his humanity and become a monster, become the colossal titan, but he can't. Armin got a taste of being a monster, and he wants to go back for the sake of his humanity. Bertolt got a taste of the life of a regular human, but he needs to leave that behind to complete his mission. While Armin thinks he's become too much of a monster to be a good human, Bertolt is too human to become a monster. I say this because their struggle in Season 3 Part 1 sets up for their development in Season 3 Episode 15. Now I'll repeat what I said earlier, this isn't going to be an in-depth character analysis. This is more just going to be an overview of their development to show how they parallel one another. If you want a more in-depth analysis of their characters, I will do that in the future. For now though, this is more of a broad strokes look at their development rather than an in-depth analysis. On top of that, trying to analyse two characters at the same time is difficult, convoluted and confusing. So we'll look at their character development separately, and then look at the parallels after we've had that foundation established. Since the episode starts with Bertolt, we'll start the analysis with Bertolt. The episode begins with Marco stumbling upon Reiner and Bertolt while they're talking, and they accidentally reveal too much information. Reiner and Annie restrain Marco and take his gear off, with the three leaving him for dead. It's in this moment that Bertolt quite literally looks back on the friendship he's abandoning, and Marco yells at them about how he didn't even get a chance to negotiate and talk this through. Rainer, Bertholdt and Annie couldn't afford to let any information slip. They had no choice but to kill Marco. There was no opportunity for negotiation. It was inevitable. It had to happen. Further into the future, but still in the past, just before the current events of the anime, Bert thinks about all the people they've made suffer and how much they've suffered as well. He doesn't want to cause more people to suffer, and so he makes his decision. They will win. They will bring an end to it all here, so that no more people have to be put through this hell. Zeke says farewell, and Rainer and Berthold begin to make their way across the wall. Rainer tells Bert how he's always viewed him as unreliable, and how he's always just waiting for a signal rather than acting on his own and getting the job done. Bert knows this. He understands that he always lets everyone else do the dirty work despite being the Titan with the most power. But this time he promises he will be different. He won't just wait for Rainer's signal to make a move. He'll act on his own. He'll get the job done. And he'll do it to the fullest extent of his abilities without hesitation. That's the promise he makes to Rainer. Later, Bertolt is sat in his barrel. He thinks to himself that it's been far too long since the ambush started without Rainer sending a signal, and that there's a good chance Rainer is in serious danger. And yet, he is still unable to act on his own. He remains in his barrel despite his concerns, failing to act on his own worries, instead simply idly waiting for Rainer's signal, failing to deliver on the promise he made to Rainer earlier on the wall. By the time Rainer is able to signal for help, it's too late. Bertolt is thrown in only to find Rainer on death's door. If Bertolt now goes through with transforming into a Titan, he will either kill or incapacitate everyone inside Gigantia, as Armin says, allowing for them to take Erin and win. But he will also kill Rainer. Because of this, Bertolt gives up on the plan that could have allowed them to win, and instead chooses to go down to Rainer. And this is when it all comes crashing down on him. His nature, his inability to act on his own and give up his humanity for the sake of his mission has once again resulted in a failure. An attack that would have seen the trio take victory failed because Bertolt didn't act on his own worries, instead idly waiting for Rainer to give the signal, and because he was unwilling to throw away his humanity and accept the death of his friend. Two things that he's been grappling with for a while now and promised he would get over, but has again failed to deliver on that promise. And this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Bertolt wants to win, so they can put an end to all this pain and death. But this is, in his mind at least, the second time he's messed up everything due to his nature. He won't do it anymore. He knows what has to be done because there is no other choice. There is no room for negotiation, for talking this out, and his desire to keep his humanity has resulted in failure and the continuation of this suffering for everyone so many times. He tells Rainer that he needs to move on his back to protect himself from Bertolt's transformation, and if he doesn't, Bertolt isn't going to stop this time. If Bertolt's plan kills Rainer, he's willing to accept that. He's no longer going to allow this conflict to continue, even if it means the death of his best friend. I'm sure it's very painful for Bertolt, and I'm sure he's hurting on the inside, but he feels that this has to be done no matter what. This conflict needs to end. Armin calls for them to talk and negotiate, but Bertolt doesn't believe it's actually a negotiation. He sees the soldiers surrounding him and the scouts heading to finish off Rainer, and in his mind, this isn't the scouts trying to talk it out. This is them trying to buy time so they can surprise him and finish the two shifters off, and Armin doesn't even deny it. Now, that last line in particular I will cover in much more detail if I ever do a manga spoiler analysis of Bertolt's character, but for now we're moving on. Bertolt further establishes his conviction when he holds his own against Mikasa, showing he's not holding back anymore. He's fighting at his full potential, possibly for the first time ever. At the very least for the first time we've seen since breaking down the wall. He escapes, and we see the culmination of all his character development up to this point. Bertolt seems to fully believe that this was inevitable. And remember, when we're talking about Bertolt's character development, it doesn't matter whether this was actually inevitable. It doesn't matter whether there was no other choice. What matters is that's what Bertolt believes. That's what you've got to remember. You may be sat there thinking, oh, what's Bertolt on about? Of course there was a way out. Of course they had other options. But when it comes to analysing a character and their development, it doesn't matter so much what the truth is. What matters is what they believe to be the truth. And here Bertolt believes that this situation was inevitable. There's nothing they could have done to prevent this. No room for negotiation. No opportunity to stop and turn back. This has to be done, and no one is to blame for it. Instead, Bertolt blames the world, saying that the world is just that cruel. Now, there is also another line that I find quite interesting. That is when he says, "I can see everything clearly." Now, in the manga, it's presented more along the lines of, "I can see everything around me," like he's become highly aware of his surroundings. But considering this chapter in the manga has some pretty notorious and problematic mistranslations anyway, and the line in the anime, in my opinion, is far more interesting, I'm gonna take his line in the anime as the canon one for now, unless someone proves otherwise. And in the anime, the line almost makes it sound like he's truly come to understand the situation. In the past, he was confused, unsure who was right and wrong, which side he should be on, but now he sees everything clearly. He understands what's going on. His friends like Armin and Eren, they haven't done anything wrong and they don't deserve to die, but they have to anyway. We as an audience don't understand why, of course, but Bert seems to have finally come to terms with the idea that it is the undeniable reality of our world. And then he transforms, leveling a chunk of the city and killing Hanji Squad and potentially also Hanji herself. Now, let's move on to Armin. When he first shows up in this episode, he's visibly upset over the fact that there was no room for negotiation with Reiner. The scouts don't have the technology or the knowledge to retain a shifter, and their enemies are also unwilling to reveal their true motives. And so he comes to the conclusion that this was all inevitable. There was no other way. Then, once Bertholdt comes flying in, Armin sees his chance. He wants to work things out, to talk this through, despite knowing that this is probably impossible. Then, once Bertholdt comes flying in, Armin sees his chance. He wants to work things out, to talk this through, despite knowing that it's probably not possible. He wants to change things anyway. He wants peace. Armin can't accept that this is inevitable. He can't accept that this is how things have to be. He questions Bertolt but doesn't get much. Armin, in an attempt to get to Bertolt, brings up Annie, but he makes the wrong call, and Bert simply charges Armin, pushing him back to the rooftop. In fact, Bert actually shakes Armin up quite a bit, and Mikasa is forced to come in and save him. Armin tells them not to worry, that Bertolt won't risk transforming now, but once again, he makes the wrong call. Bertolt does indeed transform, and as far as Armin is aware, wipes out all of Hanji Squad and everyone else inside the walls other than the surviving 104th members. Then, once Bert is in Titan form, Armin's squad asks for his plan, and he suggests falling back to Erwin for new orders and waging a battle of attrition, only for Jean to immediately tell him that's not possible. Armin has made the wrong call. Armin failed to negotiate with Bert, made the mistake of bringing up Annie with Berthold, which only seemed to make Bertolt more resolute and angry. He was incorrect in his judgment that Bertolt wouldn't transform, and when it comes to dealing with the Colossal Titan, he came up with a bad plan that, if Jean hadn't pointed it out, could have led to the whole mission failing. He made the wrong call multiple times and has only ended up making the situation worse. That isn't because Armin isn't smart, he is, but he's shaken up, and the more worried he gets, the worse his decisions get, and he's beginning to doubt himself more and more as he continuously makes bad and incorrect decisions. But now everyone once again is putting their trust in him and asking that he comes up with a way to overcome this seemingly insurmountable battle. And he's not ready. His experience with Berthold has completely destroyed his confidence in himself and his ability to lead, and now he doesn't know what to do. Now, I'm sure many of you have already realised the parallels between their character developments. As one becomes stronger in character, the other becomes weaker. As Armin gains confidence, friends, and reaches his potential throughout the first two seasons, Berthold becomes mentally weaker, regresses further into his shell to hide his true self, and begins losing the people he cares about. And this episode harbours the reversal of the situation. Both realise that the situation they're in is inevitable, at least in their minds. There is no room for negotiation on either side. They simply have to keep pushing forward and fighting for what they believe. But their reactions to this realisation are polar opposite, and that comes down to their character. Armin is someone who has already begun to worry about his humanity. Although he realises that one must rise above monsters by abandoning their humanity, he struggles to actually do it. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to slaughter his enemies like monsters, and when he comes to realise upon the defeat of Reiner that such action may be the only option, his pre-existing fears and self-doubt come crashing down on him, and he desperately tries to work things out with Bertolt peacefully, ignoring the revelation as if trying to prove it wrong, but he's unable to do it. Despite trying to prove his fears wrong, he only ends up confirming it, as his negotiation does nothing to change the situation. and he's so shaken up that he begins doubting himself and making bad decisions. He loses all the confidence and leadership that he garnered over the past 2 seasons because of his refusal to accept that there is no peaceful option, followed up by his complete failure in handling the situation with Bertholdt has totally shaken him up. Bertolt is the opposite. He used to be like Armin is now. He didn't want to accept the fact that he had to abandon his friends. He couldn't accept that there was no peaceful solution, or that he would have to abandon his humanity. His hesitation to accept the truth is what caused him to make bad decisions, and hesitate to act on his own or come up with his own plan, and has resulted in multiple failures. It's just like Reiner said. With Armin, he started off accepting the truth that they had to abandon their humanity to change the world, but the more and more he's been forced to confront that idea, the more he's grown afraid of it, and the more he's tried to find peaceful solutions, eventually resulting in him losing all confidence and leadership ability. Bertolt, on the other hand, has never been able to accept that he had to abandon his humanity. He's never been able to accept that there was no other way than to abandon the friends he made in the 104th, kill them even, and become a monster to achieve his goals. But as he's gone through this mission, he's been confronted over and over again by this truth, through the failure of himself and the victory of others. But now, he's come to terms with this. He's accepted that this has to be done, and he doesn't blame himself or his enemies. Instead, he blames the world for being a place where you must abandon your humanity to achieve victory, for being so cruel as to force him, a scared child who just wants to live a normal life, to become a monster. Well, anyway, that's my brief surface-level analysis of Bertolt and Armin in episode 52. I had to skip over a ton of stuff, both to avoid manga spoilers and also just for the sake of this video not being hours long, but trust me, there is still so much I could talk about with these characters, and I'm sure I will in the future. If you like this video, then please like and consider subscribing. It helps so much to know people enjoy my content and want to see more of it. Speaking of which, if you want to see more content, feel free to leave a comment asking for a specific subject to be covered. It could be a specific character, the relationship between characters, like in this video, a specific chapter or episode, a theory or something about the world, the rules, how the Titans work, any topic, really. I don't mind, I'm open to suggestions. Just make sure you subscribe and you hit that bell if you want more stuff. I know that every single person in existence begs their fans to subscribe and hit the bell, but it really is helpful, and I've noticed with past videos that I'll get subscribers, and then the subscribers don't watch my new videos, presumably because they didn't hit the bell. So if you want to actually see more content, then make sure you do that, because that's probably the only, because I'm a small channel, you know. You're not going to get my channels in your recommended feed after you watching the latest Joe Rogan podcast, you know. If you want to see my new videos, you're probably going to have to subscribe, because I'm not really big enough for YouTube to take notice in me, right? So, anyway, I'm just reminding you, because I know everyone says it, but it's just so easy to watch a video and then just move on to the next one without thinking too much, and I feel it's a good idea to remind people. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully see you next time. Yes.